So what we're going to accomplish in this episode is boring the holes for the shelf pin holes, the hinge holes, and then also making the dado for the back panel. Let's get to it. All right, so we've got all of our panels cut, we've got our face frame cut, we've got pretty much everything cut for the cabinet. Everything's ready to go. Now we need to think about down the road when we start doing our assembly. Our back panel is just going to be 1/4 inch Luan. So it's a simple product you can cut down to fit. We're going to cut it to size after we dry fit the entire cabinet to make sure it's cut the proper size. If you haven't already, now is the time to label your parts. I've got my bottom of my cabinet, and I marked the left and the right side. I've got the side of my cabinet, right side bottom, left side bottom. Then also mark your front and your back, or where your face frame is going to go. That way you know where you're going to have your groove or your dado for the back panel. So let's talk a little bit about what a dado is. We've got our hanging rail right here. Hanging rail goes on the bottom towards the back of the cabinet. Then we're going to have our back panel. So you don't see, when you're hanging your cabinet, you don't see the wall that it's up against. That back panel will fit in a groove or a dado that we're going to cut on the bottom and the two sides of the cabinet. It's going to be about 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter wide and about 9 millimeters deep. And we're going to cut that all across the length of the bottom of the panel. We have several routers we could use to cut this dado in this panel. The one I'm going to use today is the MFK 700. Along with the edge guide, it allows us to make very quick and easy dados. I'm going to take the base off, and I already have an 8 millimeter bit installed in the router. The material we're going to use is 6 millimeters, so it gives us 2 millimeters, or a small gap, allow for that panel to move back and forth. So to install the edge guide, I'll take, like I said, I took the base off the router, lock that in, lock that in. I'll loosen all these other ones, except for that one. One thing that sets us apart from everybody else is there's actual center lines on the router itself, all the way around. So once I have the center line of my dado, I can put this on here. I can get it close, and then I have a micro adjust dial right here. And each time I turn that dial, you can see that it's slowly getting closer to that pencil line. Once I have it dialed in, I can lock everything down. Now I'll just put the router motor back in the base. Tighten this down. I'll tighten this down. Now I've already got the depth set. The way I set the depth is I just glued a couple dominoes together. I know I want to dado into the board 9 millimeters. So I've got a 5 millimeter tenon and a 4 millimeter tenon. Where I got that set at the perfect height. So I'm not trying to measure with my tape or my folding rule from the base of the router to the tip of the router bit. And that's the perfect height each and every time. So once I have the base back on the router and the edge guide set up, I'm going to talk a little about holding the router. What a lot of people want to do is they'll grab it like this. Once they turn it on, they'll try and push it through. There's too many chances for it to tip in and out, and then you get a curved line. What I like to do is I'll hold the edge guide right like this. Once I turn the router on, I'll put my other hand here, and you've got 2 hands on the router at all times. So now with the dado cut, dust free I might add, you can see where my hanging rail fits in here. My back panel will slide down through there. Now I can run a screw from the inside of the cabinet through the back panel, through the hanging rail, securely into the wall. Now that I've got the dado done on the back of the panels, we can focus on the line boring for the shelf pins and also the hinge holes. I'm going to be using the LR32 system, which consists of the LR32 rail. It's just a 1400 or 55 inch rail that has holes bored in it that are 32 millimeters apart. That'll also work with the LR32 system for either our 1010 router or our OF 1400 router. Today I'm going to be using the 1010 router. 32 millimeter system is one reason that I still work in the metric system. I cut these panels so they are divisible by 32. that allows me for a lot of different things, but allows me to use this LR32 system to drill my shelf pin holes. On the guide rail, we use these stops, and there are several different numbers on there, so it gets a little confusing, but for this setup, I'm gonna have the 32 facing up, and it's gonna be away from my material. Already got the one down there set. I just place this one on the bottom, put the screw in, and because I cut it exactly 32 millimeters, it fits nice and snug. Now this way, when I go to drill the holes back here, I can flip my guide rail around and all the hole spacings are going to be exactly the same. So now that I've got the guide rail centered on the panel, basically, now I need to figure out how far off the front edge I'm going to place my holes. And that's where these come into play. And these are adjustable stops. You see right here, we've got it from 0 all the way up to 110 millimeters. I'm going to be setting these at 37 millimeters. So it just slides on the rail like that. And we have another one down here. And then I can just push my rail back to those line up. Now I know those holes are going to be perfectly parallel with the front of my cabinet. This is one area you definitely want to clamp the rail down to your material so it doesn't move on you. On the router itself, I've installed a 5mm spiral brad point bit. We also have another bit available for it. It's a flat bottom through cut bit. So we can cut all the way through the panel if I'm doing a center panel. I have the depth set to about 1/2 inch. So it'll just bore down to about 1/2 inch. And that allows for the shelf pin holes to go in and also the screws for the hinges. So now that I have the guide rail in place, I can remove my stops, it's clamped down, and I can focus on where I'm going to bore the holes. Now on this guide rail, I've went ahead and marked where my screw holes are going to go, and then I've got 6 shelf pin holes in the middle, because I don't need shelf pin holes all through the entire cabinet. So when I put the router on here, there's a little viewing window that's got an arrow right there. So I can see exactly where I'm going to drill. I'm not guessing. Before we get started, there's a couple things you want to do as far as placement of your hands on the router itself. Once I have the router on, I'll lock it in place, lock the trigger in place. Then I always have 2 hands on the router. My left hand will be down here, and this controls the pin action. So as I push that down, that pin in here raises up and indexes on the next hole. Very quick process. Then all I have to do, because it's a plunge router, is just push that down and it comes back up. I also keep my hand underneath the cord and the hose just to keep it up and out of my way. So let's give it a shot. So I've gone ahead and I've flipped around this first panel. I've got my holes drilled on the front of the panel. Now I've got to drill the holes on the back of the panel. Now, if I just went 37 millimeters from the front of the panel back here, my holes are going to be extremely close to this back panel. So what I want to do is I'll just keep this set at 37 millimeters, but instead of referencing off the back edge of the plywood, I'm going to reference off that dado that I put in earlier. So now I'm 62 millimeters from the back to that line, or 37 millimeters from that edge to the center of my holes. Make sure you note to yourself, don't drill these holes on the back side of your panel, because you don't need hinges on the back side of your panel. So I'll just drill the center 6 holes. So now that I've got the right side done, I'm going to come back over here and do the left side. The good thing about the Festool system is once I set it up one time, I can do 5, 10, 20 cabinets and they're all going to be the same. So let's get started. Finish up this side of the cabinet, I just have to do the center holes and then we'll be finished. If you'd like to continue watching this cabinet build, click here or watch this video. And don't forget to subscribe.